Greetings and welcome to Meet a CHM Researcher. My name is Cory MacDonald. I am the Engagement Director for the Choroideremia Research Foundation, and this is the start of a new series that we are doing, where we are going to sit down and have a chat with a CHM researcher to give you the opportunity to get to know them a little more besides the name that you see on the papers or the face you see up on the when they're at our conferences and presenting. So we decided to start off this series with someone who is no stranger to anyone who has spent any time within the CHM family. He has been a flat-out warrior for us as a community for as long as I've known him, which has been a long time. So I'd like everyone to please meet Dr. Ian MacDonald. How are you today, Dr. Mac?
I'm just great, Cory. It's such a pleasure to be here. I had my flu shot on Sunday, and I had chills all night.
Oh, no.
It was probably in anticipation of this interview.
I guarantee you it's a very low pressure situation. It won't be like one of those 2020 things where we do the gotcha questions. So,
Gotcha.
So now you live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So you're just a tiny bit west of where I am in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And work at the University of Alberta. Now, you have your background is somewhat interesting in that you're not just an quote unquote just an ophthalmologist or just a geneticist, but you do both.
That's right.
So, and I always found that fascinating that you got to be pretty darn smart to get to that point, in my book anyway. So, but before we get into that, I want to get into a little bit of, okay, we know Dr. Mac does research on CHM, and he sees patients, and he does, he looks at research on other eye diseases as well. So what does Dr. Mac do when he's not working, or other than sleep?
Well, I made an apple pie on the weekend.
Ooh, there we go.
Yeah, so I do like the normal things in life. I like eating.
and I also know you like you paint.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which I think is, now, did you take lessons for that, or is that just something you just kind of picked up and developed over time?
Well, my dad was an amateur painter, and I guess I probably picked it up from him. And he taught me about perspective, things that are closer are bigger, and things that are farther away are smaller. And showed me how to use oils, and he was very much a landscape painter, and I've tried my hand at different media. And I don't know that I have a one that suits me best, but I have my dear wife of many years. She's my best critic. You do the flowers best, Ian.
That might be a thinly veiled, suggestion too about getting flowers. Just saying. Yeah, when you sent me a few, which I'm sure Todd will be inserting into this video, and
oh my, okay.
I think it's pretty neat. Some of them are just absolutely beautiful. I enjoyed it. And then you also enjoy music, but I do know that it's, for a fact that it's somewhat limited in scope, because I know that I introduced you to the greatest band from Canada ever, Rush. And you had never heard of them.
That's right.
I was kind of shocked about that, being a Canadian and not knowing who Rush was. But but outside, what music do you like to listen to?
Well, I was listening to Randy Travis last night.
Oh, there you go. Okay. That's a little different from Rush, yeah.
Well, I think there are big gaps in my life because I went to medical school. And then I guess I didn't see those movies for 4 years. But I always went to the local radio shop when I was a kid because you could buy a 45 for $1. And that was my well, that was my week's allowance. And
Nice.
so Max Niveen would let us look at what they had in. And I think one of my first ones was Ricky Van Shelton, From a Jack to a King. Oh, I love that.
Oh, no kidding. I remember my first record with 45. It was on the back of a cereal box that my mother had purchased.
Oh,
And it was a promo thing, but it was The Temptations, My Girl.
oh, of course. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And that's when I first started getting an appreciation for harmony.
Ah, well, there you go.
Yeah, because my main exposure at that point was, my mother, of course, with her Elvis albums, and he didn't do a lot of harmony. So
Yeah.
he was just Elvis. So he didn't need no harmony. He was Elvis. So
Well, yeah, my mom loved Elvis. Absolutely wonderful. I do have a rocker at home, and that's my eldest son, who's a musician. And so he's got so many guitars. Oh my God. It's like, anyway.
I have a friend on Facebook who plays guitar in a local band, and he's always posting these various jokes about, basically you're not a real guitar player unless you have at least 5, and preferably 1 for each day of the week is what you're.
How about 1 for each day of the month?
Well, it was the guitar player from Cheap Trick, Rick Nielsen. His collection he had before he actually has recently started selling them. Like he donates for charity auctions and things like that. But his collection, he had over 600 guitars in his collection.
Ooh, wow.
Can you imagine? It just, amazing. I don't know, that's a lot of money.
That is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that is good stuff. Anyway, so where did you go to college?
I went to school at McGill University in Montreal.
And McGill, of course, is where Dr. James Naismith.
Yeah, you're right about that.
A famous alumni. He's almost as famous as you are. And he graduated, a little while ago, but ended up inventing basketball here in Springfield.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he grew up in Almont, Ontario, I think, and there's a museum there. Yeah, I think I've got that right. Not sure, but yeah, it's amazing what people did in their careers. Hey,
yeah, and then he was actually he was the rugby coach at Springfield College.
Really?
Yeah. And basketball came about as a game to keep his rugby players in shape during the winter time when they couldn't practice out on the field because it was covered in snow. And the original basketball game looked nothing like you see it today. It was basically a form of indoor rugby without tackling. And that was the original basketball game.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And I guess would they have used leather balls?
They used a rugby ball.
Used a rugby ball.
Yeah, the standard rugby ball.
Hard to bounce that baby.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't. There's a really neat at the Basketball Hall of Fame here in Springfield. There's a really neat display that shows the evolution of the basketball.
Oh. From
the original rugby ball to the modern day NBA ball.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty interesting, yeah.
Very, oh my. Well,
so we know of at least 2 famous alumni from McGill University now. So now, how did you first learn about choroideremia?
Well, I'm sure that this story gets told many times. So a very nice lady, Barbara Owens, called me. She worked for the Ottawa Citizen, and I happened to be doing a fellowship in genetics at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario.
Okay, so you were a geneticist first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she phoned up, and the secretary said, Ian, there's somebody on the line. She wants to know if anybody's doing any research on choroideremia. It runs in her family. And so she passed the phone to me, and I said, Yeah, I don't know anybody who's doing any research on choroideremia. But would you like to get started? So, I guess I was a fellow and I had to do a project. And so this lady came from a very large family, originally from Wexford County in Ireland. They had emigrated to Canada in 1847 and had settled in the Upper Ottawa region above the capital in an area where lumbering was very much prominent as an industry. And they needed farmers to grow crops and support the lumber industry. And so the family had emigrated, and the head of the family had choroideremia, and he had 6 daughters, all of whom were carriers.
Oh, wow.
And so I think there are over 2,000 family members all over North America related to this original family. And so I went about seeing some of these people, went around visiting them in their homes, in little places like Douglas and Eganville, Arnprior, Renfrew, all these little towns that were part of that era of the lumber industry. And so then I had what was the equivalent of a direct ophthalmoscope, something that you would use to examine the eyes in let's say a family practice office, like a very small handheld device. And I was looking into the eyes and saying to myself, Ian, I don't think I'm not sure you know what you're doing. So then I realized I had to become an ophthalmologist if I really was going to make a go of this. And that's the short story.
Wow. And so then you went back to school and became an ophthalmologist, and wow.
Yeah, there you are.
That's just incredible. That really is incredible.
I
And
was
so that's
younger.
how you got that. So that's how you got interested in choroideremia.
Yeah.
And started going from there. And then of course you now you helped or you did develop the blood test before there was genetic testing. Diagnosing choroideremia, there was a blood test, which I know we used to have people send their blood samples to you to be analyzed. And then, so it was your team that developed that too, as well, early on.
That's right. I worked with a fellow that I hope you have a chance to interview, Miguel Seabra from Portugal now.
On my list.
And I went down to the University of Texas Southwestern to work with him and his friend YK Ho. And we looked at really developing a test that could look at the protein. And so all the individuals with choroideremia really lack the protein product. And so it doesn't require a genetic test. It's just a protein test. But of course, you'd have to draw blood and isolate the protein. But it was a very simple test and proved to be very, very helpful too, because in some cases, gosh, it looked like choroideremia, but we couldn't find the genetic change. Well, maybe it's not choroideremia. Oh yeah, but you're missing the protein. So yep, it's choroideremia. And that proved to be very helpful for some patients.
And it's, from the patient perspective, it's helpful to know, because I know patients who went through 3, 4, 5 different diagnoses before taking their blood sample and getting it off to Dr. MacDonald to at least confirm or deny that it is choroideremia. And, and that knowledge was huge back then,
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun, really, in a scientific sense, but also connecting with people who have kept in touch with me and have wrote. I mean, they'd seen me, let's say 30 years ago, and said, I wonder if you could help me.
Hey, I personally have lost count of the number of times I have emailed you to ask you a question that somebody had asked me that I didn't know the answer to.
Well,
And
it's very, very nice of you to do that, though,
I've
Cory.
always appreciated the fact that you could either get the answer for me or point me to the person who could. And that, because that just again helps out. Having knowledge helps out the patient. And
Absolutely.
you've been a major cog in that pathway to knowledge. So for that, I thank you.
You're
So now
welcome.
I know, and I love how I phrase this as a question, even though I know the answer. But you have been to both CRF conferences and CRF science symposiums, and which have always been very, very fascinating and fun. Now, because you're the first, you get to be the first person to answer this question. What was your experience like from a personal and professional perspective? A CRF conference, for instance.
Well, first, it was so much fun. It was like a big family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the first ones was in Chicago at a Best Western. I don't know.
Marriott. Yep, that was the first one you came to. We wanted you to come to New Orleans and party with us, but I think that was before. But I think that you were busy that particular weekend. So,
well, my wife nixed that pretty quick. But in Chicago, I was overwhelmed because in the sense that, gosh, you were the people that I'd spoken with, communicated with, send me their samples. And I was introduced and there was this huge outpouring of clapping and hooting. And it was like I was a rock star. I thought, oh, whoa.
You are.
Did you see that? So I was really overcome. It just I wasn't expecting that. I when you usually go to a scientific meeting, there's a lot of I don't know, grumpy looking faces. Never seen a grumpy face at a choroideremia meeting.
That is true. We tend to have for years I referred to it as a CHM family.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to people, people who are signing up to come to their first conference, and I will be emailing with them or be on the phone. And, and sometimes, as you know, having seen patients, many times a patient can be the only person or one of very few people within their own family that's affected.
Yeah.
And it can be very, quite isolating. And here they are coming to a conference where they're going to meet a whole bunch of CHMers. So there's that nervousness factor.
Mm.
I always tell them the same thing. You're coming to a family reunion. You just haven't met the family members yet.
That's right.
And that's pretty much, that's the vibe that I've always liked about our conferences.
I agree.
Now, how do you feel, and you're actually doing some too as well, which we'll touch on. How do you feel about the current state of CHM research? And are there specific areas you feel that need looking into in more detail?
Well, I do think that areas of research have really developed. And there are some areas before we had, let's say, genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, we really flogged that. Looked at the front end, the back end. And so there's still more to learn. Don't get me wrong. But still, there's some things that just aren't quite explained. And so maybe that's an indirect answer. But I think what you're leading to is that, what's happening now that you're excited about. And I'm beginning to realize that there's a lot going on in that little cell in the body that depends on the choroideremia protein, REP1. And gee, we know a lot, but we still haven't figured it out. You know, why would it be that three brothers in a family, from eldest to youngest, they all have the same change because they're brothers, but how come they're different?
Yeah.
How come? And oh yeah, well, it's but it's still, we still haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're all missing the protein, well, what's going on? So some of these questions just they continue to nag, and and why is it that there are some choroideremia carrier women? So we'll call them carrier women, because sometimes people get mixed up. You're a carrier, but you're not affected. Now they get all so. But there's some women who behave as if they have choroideremia. And so, for example, I saw a lady from Vancouver Island in summer. She came all the way. She knew we had communicated maybe 10 years ago, and she was in her 50s, and she's lost a lot of her central vision. And her retina looks like a 30-year-old male with choroideremia. And so she behaves as if she is affected by choroideremia. So why would that be? Because we've all been led into this dialogue that, well, the carriers aren't affected because they're just carriers, and then all of a sudden you say, well, yeah, that didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. So what's going on? And so there's still more to do. There's still more to do. And I think with the modern techniques that we have now that are cell-based and gene-based, I think we're going to be uncovering some things that we hadn't really thought about before. We thought about, but we didn't know how to explain. And how to explain these things is very important, because if we can say, okay, well, I think there's some modifier here that's happening. And if you modify the modifier, then you might have it might have a positive effect.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember years ago speaking to the late Dr. Burson here, and we were speaking about carriers, and it was kind of funny because, in his theory, as he told it to me, he said, women get half the disease. He said, I think if a woman could live to about the age of 140 years old, that she too would go blind from choroideremia. And then I said, well, what about, those really rare women that have full-blown choroideremia? I know 6 or 7, I believe. It might even be a couple more than that, but there's not many, but they do exist. And I said, well, what about those? And he said, I don't know. I mean, and this is, of course, around 1995 we had this conversation. So, and a lot's happened in that time frame, but a lot more knowledge is gained. But as you said, there's more to know.
It's interesting because Elliot Burson was a very strong character.
Oh, yes.
And one of the first questions that I asked him was something along the lines of, how does this happen? And not about choroideremia, but his immediate response was not an answer, but who told you that? so quite challenging.
He was like you said, a strong person, but to give credit where it's due, I think back to, I'm a 4-year-old child in 1968 and not symptomatic, and you really didn't have the diagnostic equipment you have today.
No.
And yet he correctly diagnosed me.
Yeah.
With choroideremia. I mean, that is, pretty
pretty
darn good.
Pretty darn good. Pretty darn good.
That's the way I see that. But yeah. So I mean, gene therapy, as we both know, is the hot topic now.
Yes.
But I mean, but then we're also, the things like optogenetics,
Yes.
such as like Dr. Nirenberg's, who is also on my list,
Mm.
future interviewees. There's so many different ways of looking at how can you get that sight back or maintain the sight or both.
Right.
Of course, like Dr. Gam's work with, replacement therapy and, Dr. Young's work as well. And I'm kind of saddened at the fact that I know that you are going to be officially stepping away within the next couple of years. So I'm just hoping that there's somebody as nice and as brilliant as you that's stepping in to your place.
Oh, yes. There's a very nice young man. He's much smarter than I am. That's what I really like about it. We should just talk briefly, Cory, about something that's bothered me. So in the sense that we can take cells, and Dr. David Gam does this.
Mm-hmm.
He can change those cells into stem cells.
Yeah.
And so it's really important because we can then use those stem cells to test things, potential therapies even. And but what I've been realizing over the years is that we take cells from a choroideremia individual and grow them in culture, and you know what? They don't grow the same.
Really?
Yeah, they're not happy.
Well, we're always a little difficult. So
yeah, well, so
my wife would say that.
There's something there. There's something there that's innate that we've got to replace the product because those cells just aren't happy all by themselves. And so that there again, it's these basic things that we haven't been able to figure out. And so I'm really looking forward to some of the experiments that we're doing in-house because we've made stem cells, we've made pigmented cells from the stem cells, and then we're going to try a genetic therapy and we're going to see how those cells work now. Are they better? Do they look better? And so it's for me, it's the excitement is that there's still things that are unknown. There's still things that we can learn from. There's still things that point us in the right direction. It's taking time, admittedly, but each time we do something, we learn something.
Yeah. Well, I think that, personally, and I speak to patients about this sometimes, and especially the younger patients who are in their 20s and 30s, and they chafe a bit about how slow things are going.
Mm.
And I tell them, I say, you don't understand how fast choroideremia research has progressed in the last 20-25 years. We've gone from nothing to literal clinical trials.
Yes.
That's almost like light speed in the world of research.
Well, that's right.
And so and you've been a big part of that. And I personally thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's, yeah. Now, do you have any advice, thoughts for CHMers, just in a general view of that you would like to share about management, maintenance, care, things like that?
In general, I always start by saying the things that your mom would say. Or dad, I guess. We have that bond. So things, protecting your eyes from the sun. And so many patients with these groups of disorders will complain that, yeah, I was out golfing and man, the next day it was just like a visual hangover. I just couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. And so wearing a pair of sunglasses or a hat when you're outdoors over water or in full sun or even the wintertime, that's very, very, very helpful. And it doesn't matter if it's polarized sunglasses or Serengetis, something that cuts down the amount of light, so it's not driving the whole process all the time. I know that I went down this path a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, but some time ago, where there were a few patients that were taking statins for hypercholesterolemia, which seems to be epidemic in North America because we're over whatever fed, and so, but it seemed to be the brother taking the statin seemed to be worse off, and so I went about with a colleague here, understanding whether that truly was the case, and we got the mouse model of choroideremia and fed the poor mouse statins and an enriched diet. They were well taken care of. And so, yes, there was an effect from the statin. It did have an effect on the electroretinogram, but here's the key point: it was all reversible. Oh, okay, all right, okay. So then that reassured me, because the part of the biochemistry of statins is to lower the pool of certain compounds in the cell. And so those compounds in the cell are ones that are very helpful for especially in a patient who's missing the choroideremia protein. So, gosh, if you put a clamp on that with a statin, maybe it's going to get worse. So, well, through science, we said, no, this isn't a problem. And so I don't think there are any drugs, alcohol included, that have a negative effect on choroideremia. So that's important. But I am very much a proponent of nutrition. Make sure you have a well-balanced diet with strong and leafy green vegetables. And that also includes fish. And so the fish is really, the component is docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA. It's a very long chain polyunsaturated fatty acid that makes up about 50% of the retina. And you don't make very much of it in your body, only about 2 to 3%. The rest comes from your diet. And the algae in the lakes and oceans make it. The fish eat it. Fish eat the algae. And then we eat the fish, so we're part of the food chain. And because of that, all infant formula is supplemented with DHA, because we tend to be a little bit deficient. We're not eating fish. We're eating beef, poultry, and what have you, and doesn't have as much DHA. But the fish is a very good source. So if you have one fish meal a day, wait a minute. Cut that. One fish meal a week, that's sufficient. You don't have to supplement. But some people say that, no, I'm not doing that. So you could buy it in the pharmacy or from your local health food store, and I take it every day, and it makes your hair silky, Cory, and your skin soft. It helps your eyes.
Yeah, I'm not. You're speaking directly to me on that no fish thing.
No, I wasn't.
Once in a great while, I'll, when I get in the mood for it, I'll get fish and chips. Mm-hmm. But I'm just not a seafood. I will eat clams any which way you can make them. Mm. Outside of that, I'm not a big person for seafood at all.
You're a New Englander, so you would have clam chowder.
Yeah, that's it though. But I don't like lobster. And so people in New England look at me like I'm some type of an alien or something, because I won't eat lobster. And I'm like, I do try it every year during Thanksgiving week. We have Karen's, my wife's entire family comes into town because her mom's birthday always falls either on or around Thanksgiving. So it's kind of a double family celebration thing. and one of her sisters lives in California. So when she comes home, one of the things she must have is lobster when she comes home.
Oh my.
So we always do a big lobster day as part of this week-long celebration. And every year, of course, they get their lobsters. I get a few pounds of steamers. I'm good to go. But every year I will try a bite of my wife's lobster, because your taste buds do change over time, and you never know. And, yeah. And every year I take that bite and I dive back into my clams. I'm like, I'm good. Well, listen, it was such a pleasure to sit down with you, and I'm still disappointed you're not going to be able to join us in Boston.
Well,
but
COVID.
Yeah, unfortunately. But Dr. Huckfeld is. We've already had a couple of phone calls, Zoom meetings, going over things, and we're getting it all framed out. And
oh, that's good.
I'm hoping it all goes well, because, if it does, then, hey, we'll see if we can take this on the road, so to say.
Yeah,
and,
that's good.
And get you worked into future ones. So
sounds great, Cory.
I mean, come on, the MacDonald's on the road. Think about that. We just have a great time.
Always.
the father-son team. So listen, thank you again so much, not only for sitting down with me today and having a little chat and a little fun and kind of getting a little bit more of an inside view of who Dr. Mack is, and but for everything you've done for the CHM community over the years, which we don't have. It would be a 3-hour thing if I had to list it all. So on behalf of the CHM community, thank you so much for being you. And please tell Ma and the siblings I said hello.
I will, Cory. I'll tell all the kids. And really, Cory, thanks for being you and being an ambassador for choroideremia. It's been a pleasure. It always is. And it's fun. And, that's part of the reason, I guess, we continue to be so hopeful and inspired.
I think you'll agree with me when people remark like that to me, and I just say it's a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is, and I think that's one of the reasons why you stay inspired and inspiring others, is the same thing. It's never really work when you love what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about some stuff.
Yeah. Well, keep thinking.
But don't drink so much.
Come on, now you said. Well, thank you again.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see you at the next session of Meet a CHM Researcher or Meet a CHM Family Members. Please check out our other videos that we have on YouTube. And we would like to also quickly thank our sponsors, Biogen, Santen, Spark Therapeutics, and Genentech, who provide the funding for us to do these things. Thank you all, and we will see you all soon.